Welcome to my channel, and today I want to share a story that will take you on a journey through struggle, faith, and the unbreakable bonds of family and community. This story is about a man named Kwame Mensah, who faced hardship, loss, and challenges that seemed impossible to overcome yet. Through resilience, love, and trust in God, he and his family discovered hope and strength in the most unexpected places. It's about how life's storms don't come to destroy us, but to shape us into the people we are meant to become. So, if you're ready to be inspired and see the power of perseverance, let's start. In a small village nestled between the rolling hills of Ghana's eastern region, where the sun scorched the earth and the rivers sometimes ran dry, Kwame Mensah had lived his whole life in quiet struggle. Life there was slow, measured by the rhythm of the soil and the cattle grazing in distant pastures, yet relentless in its demands. Kwame's home, a modest clay and thatch structure at the edge of the village, echoed with the laughter and occasional cries of his 3 children. Yet that evening, the laughter was absent. His wife, Abena, had collapsed on the uneven dirt path just beyond their yard after a sudden fall from their battered motorbike, skidding in the red mud that the recent rains had stubbornly refused to soften. The local clinic was miles away, the nearest hospital even farther, and Kwame had no money to pay for treatment. He lifted Abena carefully into their home, praying that the sharp pain in her side would ease, while their children, Kojo and little Essie, watched quietly, their young minds unable to fully grasp the gravity, yet sensing the weight that pressed on their father's broad shoulders. The granary was nearly empty, a small sack of cornmeal and a few yams the only food he could offer. The fields he had painstakingly tended for months lay barren under the merciless sun that had turned the earth to dust. Each night, after long days fetching water, repairing fences, and working as a porter in the nearby town, Kwame would sit on the floor of their simple kitchen, tears slipping down his weathered cheeks before he could even blink them away. "Lord," he whispered, voice trembling with exhaustion and despair. "Why must the rains fall so rarely, the sun burn so harshly, and my family suffer so much?" And in the quiet, he felt a presence like a warm embrace, a whisper among the shadows. "Son, the river may rise and fall, but I guide every step in the water. The trials you face cannot harm what I protect." Kwame swallowed hard, voice cracking. "Then why does it feel like I am losing every battle?" "Strength is born not from ease, but from the storms you endure," the voice seemed to reply. He glanced at Abena, lying pale on the woven mat, and his chest tightened with a pain deeper than physical fatigue. "Why so much suffering?" "Because only when you reach the end of yourself can you find the source of your true courage." That night, Kwame fell into a fitful sleep, a fragile peace settling over his heart. When dawn broke, clouds gathered with a sudden ferocity, and a torrential rain drenched the village, soaking the cracked earth and filling the parched riverbeds. Hours later, there was a knock at the door. Standing there was Dr. Kwame Mensah, a respected physician from the regional town, wearing a crisp white coat and carrying a sturdy medical bag. "I heard your wife needed help," he said, voice soft but firm. "Let me care for her. No payment necessary." Dr. Mensah tended to Abena, giving her medicine and advice, and quietly placed a small bundle of money in Kwame's hands, saying only, "You are not alone." In the following weeks, Abena's strength returned, her laughter once again spilling through the home. The crops, nourished by the generous rains, began to sprout green shoots, and life, once brittle and uncertain, returned to a rhythm of quiet abundance. Kwame understood finally that blessings were not always grand or immediate, but sometimes steady, patient, and transformative, and that the storms of life were not meant to crush him, but to cultivate a resilience he had never known before. As the days passed, the village slowly shook off the memory of the relentless drought that had threatened to steal their crops and spirits. Kwame rose before the sun each morning, tending to the small garden behind their home, now lush with cassava, okra, and tender maize shoots that had begun to pierce the red earth. Abena, recovering steadily, moved slowly at first, but soon returned to her routine, cooking meals with care and gathering firewood from the nearby grove. Kwame's children ran through the yard with renewed energy, their laughter mingling with the rhythmic drum of rainfall on the palm leaves overhead. Yet Kwame's heart was still heavy, for he knew that life in the village was never simple. Beyond the fields and homes, the forest stretched in shadowed mystery, a place of both provision and peril. Hunters spoke of leopards stalking the edges at night, and elders whispered about spirits that watched the living from hollowed trees. Kwame, however, carried a different kind of fear. The fear of failing those he loved, the fear that sickness, hunger, or misfortune could strike again at any moment. One morning, as the sun spilled gold across the village, Kwame was summoned by the council of elders. The village was facing a new threat. The river that sustained their crops had begun to dry again, and traders from the city warned that if the rains failed, the market would not buy their produce. Kwame listened intently as the elders debated, their faces lined with worry, some shaking their heads in despair. Though he was exhausted from the weeks of toil and care for Abena, something within him stirred. A determination that he would not allow his family or his village to wither under the sun's harsh gaze. Over the next weeks, Kwame worked alongside the villagers to dig trenches and channels to redirect what little water remained, teaching the children to carry buckets from the spring and urging neighbors to plant drought-resistant crops. Abena, though still weak, joined in where she could, sharing food, comforting children, and reminding everyone to pray for guidance. At night, when the work was done and the village settled into quiet reflection, Kwame would kneel outside his home, hands pressed against the cool earth, speaking softly to God. Lord, give me wisdom, give me strength, show me the way to protect what I love. Sometimes he heard nothing but the wind rustling the palm leaves, sometimes a distant call of a bird breaking the stillness. But always he felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet assurance that he was not walking this path alone. Then one evening, a messenger arrived from a neighboring town. A wealthy merchant, known for his fairness and generosity, had heard of the village's struggle and was sending seeds, tools, and a promise to buy whatever harvest they could produce. The villagers rejoiced, carrying the gifts to their homes, singing songs that had been long forgotten during the harsh months of drought. Kwame held Abena's hand tightly, feeling her warmth and strength return with each passing day. The children danced barefoot in the mud, their laughter rising above the rhythmic patter of evening rain, and Kwame understood, in a deep and unshakable way, that hope, like the river, could return if nurtured with patience, effort, and faith. Yet life, he knew, was never without its shadows. One night, as the family slept, a sudden illness struck Amma, their eldest daughter. Her small body trembled with fever, and Kwame and Abena worked feverishly to cool her, carrying her to Dr. Arguman when the sun rose. The doctor's brow furrowed with concern, but he treated her swiftly, and after several tense days, Amma's laughter returned, fragile at first, then strong and unbroken. The experience left Kwame and Abena more determined, more aware of the fragile thread upon which life often balanced. They began to teach their children the ways of the land, how to plant and care for crops, how to respect the spirits of the forest, and how to pray not only in desperation, but in gratitude for each day survived. As months passed, the rains became more consistent, the river swelled, and the garden flourished in colors Kwame had never imagined. Deep green leaves, golden maize, red peppers, and purple yams. The village thrived, its people bound closer together through shared struggle and triumph. Kwame, who had once felt the crushing weight of hopelessness, now stood tall among his neighbors, offering advice, strength, and reassurance to those who faltered. He understood now that life's storms were not punishments, but opportunities to grow resilience, compassion, and faith that was earned in action, not given freely. And in the quiet moments when he sat outside and watched the sun melt behind the hills, he whispered a prayer of thanks, feeling the warmth of God's presence wrap around him like the comforting embrace of a mother, steady, unwavering, and eternal. The village had begun to breathe again, the earth alive with growth. But Kwame knew that prosperity was never permanent, and that true strength was forged not in comfort, but in endurance. As the seasons shifted, news arrived that a neighboring village faced a famine caused by pestilence eating through their fields. Kwame gathered with the elders to discuss what could be done. The council decided to share part of their harvest, despite the hard-earned toil required to produce it, and Kwame volunteered to lead a caravan of villagers, carrying yams, maize, and water through rough paths and dense forest to reach the suffering neighbors. With Abena tending to their children at home, he journeyed over hills and across rivers, carrying the goods on the backs of donkeys and in handmade baskets, enduring sun, rain, and biting insects. Along the way, he listened to stories of hardship and resilience from other villagers, each tale weaving into his heart a stronger understanding of the bonds that tied communities together. When they arrived, he saw children with hollow eyes and mothers too weak to work the land. Kwame felt a pang of sorrow sharper than any he had known, but he pushed it aside to focus on helping. For days, he and the villagers worked, teaching their neighbors how to store crops, rotate fields, and protect against pests. Abena's voice came to him often in memory, reminding him that compassion was strength, and the act of giving did not diminish what they had, but multiplied it in spirit. Returning home exhausted, yet filled with purpose, Kwame found that the rains had returned in abundance. In the garden behind their home flourished like a painted tapestry. Rows of leafy greens, fat tomatoes, spicy peppers, and ripe bananas hanging from low branches. His children ran freely, laughing in the sun-drenched yard, while Abena prepared food with renewed vigor, her own health restored and shining with the light of someone who had faced death and returned. Kwame noticed the change in himself most of all. The nights of despair, the prayers that felt unanswered, the heavy weight of poverty and sickness, all had transformed into a quiet confidence and patience that carried him through every day. And yet, life would not pause to reward him without further challenge. In one afternoon, a terrible fire swept through part of the village, threatening several homes, including that of Kwame's neighbors. He and other men ran to form a human chain, passing buckets of water from the river, their shouts mingling with the crackle of flames. Abena led the children to safety, praying silently as she watched her husband labor tirelessly. Hours passed, and the village held together, houses saved and fires contained, though the effort left every man soaked, bruised, and exhausted. That evening, as the sun set in a sky streaked with ash and smoke, the village elders gathered to give thanks for survival. Kwame stood among them, his heart pounding with exhaustion, but also pride. The ordeal had shown him again that life's trials were rarely singular, and yet, through courage, faith, and community, they could endure what seemed impossible. In the months that followed, the village became known throughout the region for its resilience, a place where neighbors supported one another, where strength was measured. Not by wealth, but by the capacity to care, endure, and act with wisdom. Kwame shared his knowledge freely, helping others dig irrigation channels, construct better homes, and protect their families against sickness and fire. Abena, always at his side, taught women to preserve food, care for the young, and guide children in the ways of the land. The children grew into skilled helpers and compassionate youth, learning the balance of work and faith. And Kwame, who had once sat on the floor of his kitchen weeping with despair, now walked the same path with a steady gait, confidence in his heart, and a quiet voice that whispered prayers not only in desperation, but in gratitude for the lessons he had learned. One evening, as the orange glow of sunset bathed the village in soft light, Kwame knelt by the river, holding his youngest child, Isi, on his lap. He looked across the water to the hills where the rains had filled gullies and streams, and he felt a deep peace he had never known. "Lord," he whispered, "I see now life will always test me, push me, and demand my strength. But through it all, you have walked with me. You have not removed the storms, but you have given me the courage to endure them, and the wisdom to grow because of them." The wind rippled across the river, carrying the scent of wet earth and green leaves, and Kwame knew, in the quiet certainty of his heart, that he was exactly where he was meant to be, strong, resilient, and never alone. The seasons rolled onward, each bringing both trials and quiet blessings to Kwame and his family. The rains were more generous now, nurturing fields that had once been barren, and the village had become a model of resilience for neighboring communities. Kwame's days were long but purposeful, splitting time between tending his own garden, guiding younger villagers in the care of their crops, and mentoring local youth in the traditions and wisdom passed down through generations. Abena's health remained strong, her laughter once again a constant in their home. And together, They worked to teach their children not only the practicalities of survival, but the importance of courage, compassion, and faith. Amma and Kojo now carried themselves with confidence, helping in the fields and learning to respect the balance of work and prayer, while little Essie grew under the warmth of their love, soaking in lessons both gentle and firm. Yet life, as ever, was unpredictable. One day a violent storm struck the village, wind tearing through palm fronds and rain lashing against the clay homes. The river swelled dangerously, threatening to flood the low-lying fields and homes. Kwame's heart raced, recalling the months when water scarcity had plagued their lives. This time, however, he was ready. He coordinated efforts with other men and women of the village, building barriers, digging drainage, and relocating vulnerable families to higher ground. Through the long night, he moved tirelessly, carrying supplies and comforting frightened children, his hands blistered but steady. When dawn broke, the river had receded, the homes were intact, and the village emerged largely unharmed, stronger, and more united than before. In the days that followed, Kwame reflected on the trials his family had endured. From Abena's collapse to Amma's illness, the threats of famine, and the fire that had once threatened their homes. He realized that each challenge, no matter how painful or frightening, had carried a lesson, and that his greatest strength had not come from wealth, comfort, or ease, but from persistence, faith, and the love that bound him to his family and community. Recognizing the fragility of life and the importance of giving back, Kwame began organizing weekly gatherings at the village square, where elders, parents, and children could share skills, discuss strategies to improve crop yields, and provide mutual support during difficult times. Abena led workshops on food preservation and herbal remedies, passing down knowledge she had learned from her own mother. The children participated eagerly, learning to plant seeds, care for livestock, and respect the spirits of the forest, which elders insisted watched over all who lived there. Slowly, the village transformed into a hub of knowledge and cooperation, where the value of each individual was recognized, and no one bore hardship alone. Kwame often found himself sitting beneath a large baobab tree in the center of the village, reflecting on the journey from despair to abundance. He remembered the nights of silence when he had felt the weight of hopelessness, the moments when he had cried on the kitchen floor, and the voice that had whispered strength and guidance into his heart. "Lord," he whispered softly, "I see now that the storms were never meant to defeat me, but to shape me into the man I am today. You have carried me through the darkness, and now I walk in light, not because life is without trials, but because I have learned to endure them with faith." Life continued with its gentle rhythm, punctuated by challenges that tested their resilience. But Kwame no longer faced them with fear. Instead, he approached each day with gratitude, courage, and a deep awareness of the interwoven lives around him. The children learning from him, neighbors supporting one another, and Abena standing strong by his side. Years passed, and the children grew into adulthood, carrying with them the lessons of endurance, faith, and community. Amma became a healer in the village, known for her skill with herbs and her gentle counsel, while Kojo took to managing the irrigation and trade with neighboring towns, ensuring that the village prospered in a sustainable way. Essie, curious and thoughtful, grew into a leader who encouraged unity and innovation among the youth. Kwame and Abena, now older, looked upon their family with pride, understanding that the legacy of resilience, courage, and faith was the greatest harvest of all. On quiet evenings, Kwame would sit outside their home with Abena, hands entwined, watching the sun dip behind the hills and the children laugh among the flourishing gardens. He whispered prayers of gratitude for each day survived, each challenge overcome, and each soul strengthened by the trials that had once seemed insurmountable. And in those moments, he knew with certainty that life's storms did not exist to crush, but to cultivate, and that faith, patience, and love could carry any soul through even the darkest nights. Kwame had walked through fire, flood, illness, and famine, yet emerged with a heart unbroken and a spirit unyielding. In his village, among the people he loved and the land he had nurtured, he understood the deepest truth, that blessings are not always immediate. Fortune is not always visible, and yet, when one endures with courage and compassion, the storm becomes not a threat, but a teacher, guiding one towards strength, wisdom, and enduring peace. And so the village thrived, the children grew. And Kwame Mensah, who had once knelt in despair by the kitchen floor, now knelt in gratitude beneath the baobab tree, knowing that his life shaped by trials and faith had become a living testament to resilience, hope, and the unshakable power of love. With the passage of years, Kwame Mensah watched the fruits of labor, faith, and endurance unfold across every corner of his life. The village, once fragile under the weight of droughts, disease, and fire, had transformed into a flourishing community renowned for its resilience and unity. Crops grew thick and vibrant in the once parched fields. Streams and small rivers flowed steadily, and children laughed without fear. Their lives shaped by the lessons Kwame and Abena had instilled. Abena, radiant and strong, became a guiding force for women in the village, teaching midwifery, herbal medicine, and the enduring power of hope. Kwame, though older and his hands roughened by decades of work, remained the steady pillar of the community, sharing wisdom about farming, weather patterns, and the importance of mutual care. One morning, as the sun rose over the misted hills, Kwame noticed Amma guiding a group of young girls through planting yam seeds, while Kojo helped a neighboring village construct irrigation channels. Little Essie, now a teenager, led other youth in a project to clean and maintain the riverbanks, ensuring water would always flow freely to sustain the lands. Pride swelled in Kwame's heart, tempered with the humility of someone who knew that life's blessings were earned through toil, patience, and faith, not entitlement. Yet even in this prosperity, Kwame remembered the long nights of despair, the tears shed on a cold clay floor. The fear that had once gripped his soul, those memories were not regrets. They were the bedrock of his understanding. Every storm had been a teacher, every trial a shaping hand, guiding him to resilience and compassion he might never have known otherwise. One afternoon, the village gathered to celebrate the harvest, a festival that had become an annual tradition. Drums echoed through the hills, children danced barefoot in the dirt, and elders told stories that reminded everyone of the hardships overcome and the lessons learned. Kwame and Abena, seated beneath the baobab tree at the center of the village, watched the crowd with serene smiles. They saw neighbors helping one another, children laughing and learning, and the community thriving not because fortune had been kind, but because its people had endured, cared, and acted together. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with hues of orange and crimson, Kwame felt the warmth of God's presence surrounding him, steady and unwavering. He whispered softly, "Lord, I understand now. The storms were never against me, but for me. The pain, the fear, the nights of despair, they were the shaping hands of life, teaching me strength, patience, and compassion. I'm grateful for every trial, for they have made me who I am, and given me the family, community, and life I never could have imagined." Abena squeezed his hand gently, her eyes reflecting the golden light of sunset. "We are blessed, Kwame," she said, voice full of quiet certainty. "Not because life spared us, but because we endured it together, with love and faith." Kwame nodded, gazing at the children playing among the fields, the river reflecting the sky above, and the village alive with laughter and song. He knew that life would continue to bring challenges, as it always had, but he no longer feared them. Each storm would be met with patience, each trial with courage, each heartache with faith, and he understood that true strength was measured not in what was easy, but in how one rose each day, nurtured life, and offered hope to others. That evening, as night fell over the hills and the stars blinked into existence, Kwame knelt once more beneath the baobab tree. The wind carried the scent of fresh earth, ripe crops, and the quiet contentment of a village thriving in harmony. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer that was no longer desperate, but full of gratitude. "Thank you for walking with me through the storms, for showing me that even in the darkest times, your light never leaves. May our lives honor your guidance, and may this village continue to grow in love, strength, and unity." The breeze lifted his words and carried them across the land, a quiet testament to the journey of a man who had faced despair and emerged with unwavering faith. Kwame rose, taking Abena's hand in his, and together they walked slowly toward their home, listening to the laughter of their children. The songs of neighbors and the soft ripple of the river that had once threatened to leave them desolate. The village, the family, and the land thrived not because the storms had vanished, but because they had endured them, transformed by them, and emerged stronger, wiser, and united. And in that enduring light, Kwame Mensah understood the deepest truth he had ever learned. Life's storms are never meant to destroy, but to teach, guide, and cultivate a spirit that can weather anything. And through love, faith, and perseverance, even the hardest trials become blessings in disguise. If this story touched your heart, remember that life's storms are never meant to break us. They are meant to teach us strength, patience, and faith. No matter how difficult the journey may seem, hope and resilience can guide us through even the darkest times. Share this story with someone who needs encouragement today, and let it remind you that love, family, and faith are the greatest blessings of all. Thank you for reading, and may your own journey be filled with courage, hope, and endless possibilities. If you like this story, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share with your friends and family so you don't miss the next powerful story coming your way. Drop a heart in comment, like and subscribe my channel, and visit my channel for more interesting story videos.